When Caligula became emperor, there were celebrations in Rome. It was seen as a new golden age after the dark years of Emperor Tiberius. But Caligula would lead a life of debauchery and brutally murder for fun. He reveled in killing his victims slowly and painfully over days. Caligula forced families to attend their children's executions. His sadism horrified an empire.
His whole aim in life as emperor was to explore the extreme limits of what he could do.
He seems to have found the exercise of power very intoxicating and the desire to oppress other people very tempting.
Caligula was born in 12 AD, the third son of a celebrated commander from the most powerful family in the Roman Empire. His real name, Gaius Julius Caesar, emphasized his imperial lineage. Caligula's father, Germanicus, was a war hero, posted on the empire's northern frontier. Agrippina, Caligula's mother, was the granddaughter of Emperor Augustus. She was outspoken, proud, and ambitious. To curry favor with the army, Agrippina dressed her son in miniature military uniform. It was the troops who nicknamed him Caligula, meaning little boots. The child grew up amid jealousy and infighting, in a family torn apart by rivalry. Germanicus's fame was a threat to his stepfather, the ruling emperor Tiberius.
Agrippina and Germanicus are really a very dramatic, charismatic pair, whom Tiberius finds very difficult to handle because he is by nature a rather introverted, self-conscious, inhibited kind of person.
In May 17 AD, Germanicus was recalled from Germany. It was a glorious return to Rome. Surrounded by prisoners and war booty, Germanicus led a triumphant procession. Riding in his chariot, the boy Caligula lapped up the adulation. But the family had little time to enjoy their glory. 2 years later, Germanicus was dead. His painful death had all the symptoms of poisoning. Rumors circulated that Emperor Tiberius was responsible. Egged on by massive public grief, Agrippina blamed Tiberius for her husband's murder.
Agrippina was extraordinarily hot-headed, and even on his deathbed, Germanicus is said to have warned her against letting go in front of people who would take it amiss and use it against her.
Agrippina's hostility sealed her fate. The young Caligula watched as Tiberius turned on his family. One by one, his mother and 2 older brothers were arrested. They were condemned as enemies of the state and forced to commit suicide. Agrippina starved herself to death. But Caligula was spared. After his mother's arrest, he lived with his grandmother and great-grandmother, powerful Roman matrons. And at the age of 19, he was summoned unexpectedly to Capri to join Emperor Tiberius.
Tiberius invited Caligula when the moment of truth struck him about the succession, that all of the children of Germanicus were being picked off one by one, and if he did this, he would be betraying all the plans of Augustus for the succession.
Now in his 70s, Tiberius was hated in Rome and in the Senate. His reign had been overshadowed by a series of treason trials, a method of eliminating rivals who spoke against the emperor. Leaving Rome behind, Tiberius had retired to Capri, far from public scrutiny. The island had grown notorious for debauchery and cruelty. For 6 years, Caligula lived here, forced to pay his respects to the man he held responsible for his family's deaths. He played the perfect guest.
This was a young man who'd seen his brothers go and who'd learnt of all the dangers of talking out of turn. He had to contain his feelings and learn to present a polite and subservient front on any occasion. The strain of keeping up the pretense all the time must have been absolutely appalling. But I don't think it's any sign of irrationality or paranoia on his part. I think he was simply responding rationally to an appalling situation. His whole family was a dysfunctional family.
Caligula suppressed his thirst for vengeance. But according to his biographer Suetonius, he found plenty to vent his frustration on.
Yet even at that time he was not able to control his savage and reprehensible nature. Indeed, he showed the keenest interest in witnessing the sufferings and torments of those condemned to be tortured.
Caligula made the most of his time on Capri, creating key alliances. He married Junia Claudia, daughter of a distinguished senator. But his most important ally was Macro, head of the Praetorian Guard and a veteran of violence. As Tiberius's right-hand man, Macro had organized the notorious trials and executions of the emperor's reign. The partnership was so strong that Macro allowed Caligula to sleep with his wife. Tiberius watched the alliance in horror, fearful for the future of his own grandson, Gemellus. But his hands were tied. As the son of Germanicus, Caligula already had the people's support. With Macro behind him, he had the army too. Reluctantly, Tiberius named his joint successors. Caligula and Gemellus were to rule together. It would never happen. Tiberius died in March 37. Guided by Macro, the Senate threw out his will on the grounds of insanity. They handed sole control of the empire to Caligula. The new emperor was just 24 years old. Insecure and highly strung, he was tall and spindly, with sunken eyes and thinning hair. Later in his reign, he was to order men with thicker hair to shave their heads. For now, Rome was elated.
The crowds that greeted him were quite extraordinary, and he was greeted in the same way by the Senate. Everything went absolutely smoothly. They were falling over themselves to welcome him.
Since the days of Augustus, the Roman emperor was first among equals. In their enthusiasm, the Senate handed Caligula absolute power.
Caligula found himself as a leader of the Roman world, and as a man with power of life over death over all of his subjects. And perhaps what makes him different from his predecessors Augustus and Tiberius is that here we have the naked display of an autocrat.
Caligula and Macro capitalized on the mood of celebration. The Praetorian Guard were handed a cash bonus. The Roman people were treated to theater and games. The Senate were reassured that Tiberius's hated treason trials would stop. And to their relief, Caligula publicly destroyed papers listing his family's accusers. He promised there would be no prosecutions. No one knew there were copies.